What I want to share today is how we can take what you know in box 1, minor pentatonic, expand it into a full-on major scale so that you have all of the colors to work with. You have all the different sounds available instead of just the 5 notes of the pentatonic. And we're going to talk about something I think is really overlooked, which is what root notes are, how to use them, and why they're so important. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back for another video. My name's Eric and this is my channel, Minimalist Musician. Something we as guitar players spend a lot of time working on is soloing, and that includes things like scales and arpeggios and learning songs. And there's a lot of different ways that you can think about those things on the guitar, caged being one of them. Pentatonic boxes being another one, 3 notes per string is another way of looking at certain things. They're just different ways to organize the information on the fretboard in a way that makes sense to you and in a way that you can recall it and use it later on. I think we get so wrapped up in this sometimes that we actually forget that we're playing music, and for me at least that's the goal of it. I've had some opportunities to talk to some guitar players that I really admire, and at the end of the day, that stuff is so ingrained in their heads that they're no longer thinking about it. All they're thinking about is playing music, and they've done the work to categorize the information so that it's easy and quick and it's really mindless. As a teacher, I get a lot of questions about should I learn all the different modes, or should I learn everything up and down the neck? How do I implement any of this stuff into my own playing? When someone asks me that, I usually ask them to play me something in box 1 minor pentatonic over top of 1 chord vamp. In my experience, a lot of these people struggle to play something musical over 1 chord, even though they've put some time in. They know what the modes are, they know all of the different positions of their scales and where to find them, they just haven't spent the time implementing them. The way I learned was a little bit different. Although I do have a little bit of music education, I would say that I'm largely self-taught, and I got really excited about music because I just wanted to play the songs that I loved. I completely bypassed learning scales with the exception of box 1 minor pentatonic for a really long time, and even well into my professional career, I definitely didn't know what I probably should have and what I do now. That being said, I kept getting hired for gigs, even though I didn't know much more outside of that and maybe a couple of other little positions that I had strung together without really knowing what they were. The reason I kept getting hired for these gigs was because I was pretty good at playing in that position, or just figuring out where I needed to be around it, and I always made do, and I always made sure to be as musical as possible. So, all that being said, my theory on learning scales is to start small and be able to actually play music with them before you move on. Caged, pentatonic, however you view them, they're actually the same thing. And for me, it's caged that makes the most sense because I can take those shapes and I can move them up and down the neck. There's all kinds of great videos on the cage system all over the internet, so if you're unfamiliar, check a couple of those out and see what I'm talking about. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. I don't think you'll be disappointed, and even if you already know what the cage system is, you may take something away from this video. I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Okay, so scales are arguably the most fundamental building block of music theory. In most Western popular music, we're going to be most familiar with the major scale, which sounds like this. That's just do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you could also categorize those for the scale degrees that they are: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is the same thing as 1 again. The way that I see scales is everything is based off of a major scale. Your minor scale is based off of a major scale, just with certain degrees altered. Any of the modes are based off of a major scale as well. To me, that is the granddaddy of all scales, and if you're going to know anything, I think that's what you should start with. In guitar land, we're often taught the pentatonic scale first. I'd be willing to bet that most of you out there are at least familiar with this scale here. That's box 1 minor pentatonic, or at least that's how most people view it. I think generally once you learn that position, what happens is you just learn the subsequent positions. So you'd move through boxes 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's how I learned, at least. However, I never really had any frame of reference for where the root note was. All I had was a pattern moving down the neck. For instance, if I were to take what I just played, which was A minor pentatonic in the first pentatonic box, and I move that and translate it into position 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start where my last finger left off, my pinky left off on the 8th fret. I'm going to slide up here, and I'm going to play the box 2 shape, which looks like this. Now, let me play those back to back for you. The first one. And the second one. Do they sound like the same scale to you? Because to me, they don't. And I think the biggest problem with learning our scales, pentatonic or otherwise this way, is not actually having regard for where the root note is. When I was learning this, I had no idea where the root note was. I also had no idea what a root note was in general. The reason I think it's so important to understand at least where your root notes are is because you can start and end musical phrases on them, making your playing sound so much more intentional. A lot of the times when I get people coming to me looking for advice on soloing and improvising, one of the first questions is something like, how do I solo across the whole neck or in all the positions? Or how do I implement all the modes into my playing? And I think we're missing a huge piece here that we should talk about first. And that's, where are the root notes in any given scale position? If it were me, I would 100% rather only know this one position here over all of them if I knew where the root notes were, and even further if I knew where a few of the other scale degrees were, so I could make more intentional choices. Next, I would suggest learning the major scale instead of just the pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale, penta being 5, just means that we only have 5 notes in the scale instead of the 7 that the major scale or the natural minor scale offers. The way that I see it, it's kind of like being a painter and not actually having access to all of your primary colors. The pentatonic scale has a very specific sound that works really well for a lot of guitar music, especially rock and blues. However, if you're looking to play more memorable melodies, I think that the major scale is where you should be starting. Now, you may have heard the term caged thrown around before, and I think that's a really important acronym. All caged is it's an idea for mapping the fretboard based on common open chords like C, A, G, E, and D. Now let's talk about how we can tie this together with some of the pentatonic stuff we talked about a little bit earlier. We're going to use the key of C as an example because it puts us dead smack in the middle of the guitar, and we're not actually dealing with any sharps or flats, so it makes it a little bit easier to understand what's happening. Earlier, I used this as an example, and I played an A minor pentatonic scale in the 5th position, or box 1. This scale shape here, which we're viewing as a minor shape currently, can easily be viewed as a major shape and altered a little bit to play an entire major scale instead of just the 5 notes of the pentatonic scale. Something worth noting is that relative major and minor notes are always spaced out within one position on one string. What I mean by that is wherever your index finger falls, if you just line up your fingers, so if I've got my finger 1 at 5, I go finger 2 at 6, 3 at 7, and my pinky at 8. If this is my minor root note, this is going to be my major root note. Now, every major key has a relative minor key and vice versa. And what that means is those two keys share the exact same notes. So, where this pertains to us today is I want to take that minor pentatonic box and I want to think about a major scale. Now, this box here is actually based off of an E minor shape. If I think about my E minor chord, I adjust some fingering, slide it up, and make a bar, my minor pentatonic scale, box 1, is based off this E minor shape. Now, I can really easily turn that into a major pentatonic scale by starting on the relative major. And without knowing any theory, if I know that this here is my relative minor, all I need to do is just drop my fingers down, and wherever my pinky lands is going to be my relative major. In this case, it's a C note. Now, if I play that exact same scale, but I play it from my pinky to my pinky and back, it's going to sound happier or it's going to sound major. As opposed to It's a really, really cool way to access some different tones in the same position you're already familiar with. Now, let's go ahead and add a couple of more notes so that we can actually turn that into a full-on major scale. It'll look like this. So there's my 1 octave and my 2nd octave. And I can come back. And when I land on that note there, it sounds complete. So to bring things around full circle, earlier we were talking about the importance of understanding where your root notes are. Now, if we're using this shape in the context of a major scale, the major root notes fall like this. It doesn't matter where you go. Your pinky on the 6th string is always a root note. Index finger on the 3rd string is always a root note. And pinky on the 1st string is always a root note. I could go to a completely different key. I can pick a random spot. Let's pick this. We're actually in the key of D major now. Our index finger is at 7, means we're in 7th position. So if I was playing over D major, I know that landing on those D root notes is probably going to sound really good. And they're all in the same place. So once you have this information, what do you do next? Well, I think first things first, I think you need to commit it to muscle memory. You need to play the scale so many times that you don't have to think about it. My advice would be to put on a metronome and play it up and down at a speed that's very comfortable to you, to where you're making things sound really clear and connected, and do it in all kinds of different positions. You could do something as simple as starting down here at the 1st fret, and then moving up to the 2nd fret, 3rd fret. Or you could go one step further and you could try something like playing it in 4ths, for example. So you could start on C major and you could play. And then you'd go to the 4th of C major, which is F. So then you'd think, okay, where's my F? Got to put pinky on an F. And then you think, okay, what's the 4th from there? The 4th of F is B flat, so you could play. There's all kinds of different things you can do there depending on where your current knowledge lies. Something I really like to do is play the scale in 3rds, so I break the monotony of just playing it like a scale in sequential order. It sounds like this. And there's a whole host of other exercises you can do there. The last 2 things I think maybe are the most important and are the things that I was implementing before I even knew it. And that was learning different solos or melodies based in this position. I think within reason you can learn most melodies in this position because we have access to 2 full octaves. I would encourage you to take any of your favorite songs and you could try and rip the vocal melody, or you could rip a guitar solo, anything that's memorable and easy to sing. Here's a little example of a melody based around the root note C. Lastly, I think you should try and improvise using these positions as soon as possible. Once you've got the scales committed to memory and you know where the root notes are, grab some backing tracks off the internet and play along in different keys, trying to accentuate the root notes and trying to play as melodically as possible, not making it sound like a scale. That's arguably the hardest thing to do, and really it just takes practice. You have to learn a whole bunch of melodies, you have to learn a whole bunch of solos, and you have to spend a whole bunch of time improvising. Eventually it all comes together. Okay, so that was a lot of information all at once. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let you guys digest. Feel free to go back and watch and rewatch certain parts of this video. I think that if you implement what we talked about here today, you are definitely going to be a more musical guitar player. That's the goal after all. We're musicians first and foremost. I say it every time, but I truly mean it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your time and attention in such a noisy world. And don't forget to get out there, play your instrument, have some fun, and I will see you guys next time.